LTL true crime, we going deep in the dark. Yeah, peeling back the layers, expose the hidden mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie, getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi. LTL true crime, unraveling the web of evil. No stone left unturned, we dive into the pond. Yeah, we digging up the dirt, bringing justice to the crime. LTL true crime, unveiling dark realities every time. Yeah, LTL true crime, we going deep in the dark. Peeling back the layers, expose the hidden mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie, getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi. LTL true crime, go. Vengo que lleven la shine, but then I'm not talking about it, that's so. Porque tú estás en el world, no pienso echarla. No tuition loan, we bout to die. Yo, we thought it died. Better than money the boats. Yeah, I think still true crime. I'm done with dark realities every time. This is yeah, I think still true crime. I'm done with dark realities every time. Yeah, LTL true crime, we going deep in the dark. Yeah, peeling back the layers, expose the hidden mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie, getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi. LTL true crime, we going deep in the dark. Yeah, peeling back the layers, expose the hidden mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie, getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi. LTL true crime, we going deep in the dark. Yeah, peeling back the layers, expose the hidden mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie, getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi.
All right, everybody, I just popped back live. I saw some notifications come up that Iran is now striking Israel. I heard some inklings about this earlier today on the news when I was in the car, but they have actually declared war. So I'm going to pull this up here. We have a live feed coming in from ABC News. We'll go to the live feed here and kind of hang out and see what's going on. But Iran launches their attacks on Israel. They have declared war. This is not good. It's not good for the United States, considering all the tension that's been going back and forth with the Iran nuclear deal. And Israel is our ally. I'm not really one for crazy geopolitics, but I think this is a very important story. I want to get in here and see what they're saying here. So we'll hang out here and see what's going on.
Stop. It's going to stop for today. I don't know if they're going to start again tomorrow. It's going to be next week. But this tit for tat and back and forth has been going on, as Avi Melamed said, for a very long time. If you look at how Iran has systematically gone after very niche people within the Iranian nuclear and in their drone and missile programs, they credit for the killing of 4 Iranian nuclear scientists between 2010 and 12. The most significant nuclear scientists.
Yeah, I'm just going to do this really quick. This is how our president responds to a question of how we're going to respond to Iran. So it says here, they ask him, what is, let's see this. Let's see. They asked the president, what is your message to Iran at this moment? And this was his response. So this will be interesting.
Mr. President, to Iran in this moment.
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
What would trigger a direct U.S. response, sir?
That's pretty embarrassing. It's sad. And he runs away.
To Iran
He says,
in this
don't.
moment.
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go back to the special report.
This was killed in
the attack in Damascus. So whether Iran felt it needed to do this for its own audience to say that it took on its enemy remains to be seen. I hope that this barrage of drones and cruise missiles will be the end of it, but I don't think we know. And I don't think, in spite of the fact that Iran has said this is it for right now, that will necessarily be the end of it. I don't believe that Iran wants an all-out war. And I do think Iran did listen to the United States when we said we had no knowledge of that and we should not be target of this attack. At the same time, President Biden rightly said, we will do everything to defend Israel against such an attack. And I'm very glad that all of our communities, diplomatic, military, and intelligence are helping in this effort.
And Wendy, you said something that we had been hearing in recent days, that Iran does not want an all-out war with Israel. But as this plays out tonight, Israel is going to respond to some degree. And obviously there's the concern that this sort of tit for tat can escalate significantly. How worried are U.S. officials about that? How much of that is built into the calculation here in terms of expectations for this going forward?
Well, I think what everyone will have to assess, which none of us know this evening, and I'm not sure even the Israelis know, the extent of the damage, whether there have been civilian deaths, whether there have been military deaths, whether there have been explosions that have taken important facilities or infrastructure in Israel, sort of what the damage assessment is. And if it is profound, though I think between the United States and others, including us, have pushed back against some of these attacks and successfully shut down a number of these drones and have a way to deal with the cruise missiles. Nonetheless, I think the damage assessment will be critical to whether, in fact, the tit for tat continues or whether this is the end of it. We have seen in the past, of course, that Israel has lots of ways that it can act, as does the United States, as does other allies and partners. But I truly don't think Iran wants an all-out war, because I think they appreciate that we will come to the defense of Israel, and an all-out attack would be an all-out war that would ultimately could quite include us, and Iran could be taken out. So, and great damage is done. Now, a lot of that damage could be repaired, but it would take them some years to do so. We, of course, seen their alliance with Russia, which is great concern, and the Russians owe Iran a lot because of the supply of drones for the illegal and horrifying war against Iran, the invasion by Putin. So where this all ends up has become much more complicated because of that partnership with Iran over Ukraine. And so this becomes a much more complicated situation. I don't think Russia probably thinks this is a great idea either, but nonetheless probably appreciate at some level why Iran felt it needed to do something. But I'm very glad to see that Israel, along with partners and allies, is able to help Israel to defend itself.
Wendy Sherman for us tonight. Thank you for joining us. I do want to go back to Britt Clennett, who's been on the ground there in Jerusalem. That's the location where we have seen some of those alarms going off. And Britt, you were reporting about an injury to a young boy before. Have you heard anything else about some of these projectiles landing, causing damage, or any casualties?
Yeah, so we just heard a little earlier from IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari, and he gave a few stats, including on those rockets that we had seen here a little earlier. Look, he said that Iran launched tens of surface-to-surface missiles, a majority of which he said were intercepted by air defense. He said a small number of missiles landed in Israeli territory. He said one girl was injured as a result. One missile hit an IDF base in the south, causing minor damage to infrastructure. He also said it's not over. He said the IDF is intercepting more incoming threats. A total of 200 missiles and drones launched from Iran, he said. And he said the IAF still has planes in the air. Now, let's just remember, this is the first time Iran is now directly targeting Israel. And now we've heard from Hagari saying that some of them did have impact on Israeli soil. So this is no longer a confrontation led by Iran's, array of powerful proxies in this region. Israel has kept quite quiet on its own attacks on Iranian targets, but certainly the risk of confrontation we've seen grow and grow and grow since this war in Gaza has kind of ground on. And Iran has always said that it's kind of playing this long game based on strategic patience. But what we're seeing is this uncharted territory. Now, the world waits to see what kind of impact this unprecedented strike is going to have.
Uncharted territory, 200 plus missiles and drones launched from Iran, at least, and some reports that this could be just the beginning. Britt Clennett, thank you. Let's go back to Louis Martinez, our senior reporter there at the Pentagon. Louis, what more can you tell us just about the numbers, the response? I mean, we've seen the air defense system be incredibly successful in recent months, and we are seeing that again tonight. But obviously, some of those missiles, some of those projectiles are getting through.
No, they are, Whit. And I think one of the key elements here has been what Britt reported, which is that the Israeli Defense Forces said that many of these intercepts are taking place outside of Israel before they arrive into Israel proper. I think that's very important because, as we've heard from the reporting from U.S. officials, who have told us that the United States has also been intercepting some of these incoming objects, drones, and missiles before they get to Israel. One of the questions that we had was how many? And we are now hearing from U.S. officials that about a few dozen of those intercepts, those objects that have been headed towards Israel, were shot down by U.S. forces in the region. We are also told by U.S. officials for the first time now that the barrage of missiles that we've been reporting includes a cruise. It's a mix of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. Now, as I spoke to you earlier, the cruise missiles can go target precise areas, precise locations, but they do so flying at a very low altitude. Whereas ballistic missiles can get there much faster because they go up higher into the atmosphere and then strike at their targets. So that it kind of speaks to the real challenge now for the Israeli Defense Forces, because you're talking about a mix of different altitudes. You're talking about a mix of different capabilities, some moving faster than others. But what Britt is reporting indicates that the Israelis seem to be having quite a good measure of success. But it's very impossible, really, to have 100% success against so many systems coming in all at once.
Yeah, and Louis, a reminder here, it's 3:30 in the morning now in Israel. What can we expect as Sunday begins?
Well, we had expected that any type of Iranian operation was going to take place at night. That seems to have been the standard that we've seen from the United States over in recent years, or even from the United Kingdom when they were joining us in operations against the Houthis, against ISIS. Anything that's a large scale typically happens at night. When you lose the cover of darkness, I think that's one of the elements that I think you lose that element of surprise. But regardless, I think the fact that, as Martiradis is reporting, there may be 400 or 500 drones, missiles are going to be fired at Israel, that this is going to continue unabated, even probably during daylight hours. And even if it does, I think this is, remember, this is not a sight and shoot kind of a thing. The aircraft that are up there in the skies, the missiles that intercept these incoming missiles and drones, they're relying on other technologies that don't require visible light. And so, therefore, it doesn't really pose much of a difference. But again, when you have a situation like this that's going to persist for potentially hours on hours, I think that's the more significant situation, because it creates this fear among the population, and it also creates a certain reaction, I think, within the government that this is something that is going to persist. And I think that's one of the things that they're looking at right now is how long is this going to go on for? And then after that, how does Israel respond? And I think that's really the big question that all of our experts have been talking about on our air, because I think that's really the next big question. How big is the impact going to be from these strikes from Iran? Have they been successful? Have they caused more damage than we know of right now? And how will Israel respond? That's the really big question.
A long night and difficult day ahead. Louis Martinez, thank you. I want to go back to Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Steve, I've asked a few other contributors this question this evening, but I want to get your take because you're so familiar with all of this. Is Iran now directly at war with Israel?
Indeed, they are, Whit. And hopefully it doesn't go any farther than that, including the U.S. But I think when daybreak comes, I don't really think it matters how much damage has been done to Israel. I think what matters is that Iran has crossed a line and they've crossed a Rubicon. And I think that the Israeli response will be beyond proportionate, and it will do something to if not eliminate most of Iran's ability to project power. So one thing to think about when we talk about, well, how does this affect people at home? So the Iranian naval base at Bandar Abbas, which is just at the northern edge of the Strait of Hormuz, that is most of the Iranian naval power. It's conceivable that that would be one of the main targets for an Israeli retaliatory attack. If that happens, the Iranians have threatened to close off the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of the world's consumption of oil every day. So think about what that's going to do to oil prices. Think about how this oil price shock may come home to the U.S. We're already dealing with high inflation in an election year. So there will be implications here. It's a long way away, but it'll still come home to roost for the American consumer.
And we already saw earlier today a Revolutionary Guard members rappelling down onto a cargo ship and seizing it in the Strait of Hormuz, perhaps a sign of more things to come. Steve Ganyard and our entire team on this tonight, thank you. And thank you for being with us. You can stay with ABC News Live and abcnews.com for all of the latest developments. We'll have a full wrap-up tomorrow morning.
All right, let's go to another live stream here. This looks like from CBN News. Let's see. Is this live? It's got to be live. Nope, that's not live. That's not going to help. What do we got here? This is live. Sky News.
There have been regular Israeli attacks on not just the diplomatic site that was recently hit, but on other sites in Syria where Iranians have been killed. And there have also been these rather frequent wink and nod Mossad assassination or bombing attacks on sites inside Iran. And Iran has not responded directly. This is the first time they actually do respond. And from their perspective, they feel this ought to be the end of it. It's not going to be the end of it. A significant Israeli response would produce a significant response back. It would just accelerate this cycle of violence and create God knows what in terms of devastation across the region. What needs to happen is there need to be adults in the room, and the U.S. could be an adult, which would be to pull folks apart, create an architecture for diplomacy that creates a security framework that tamps this down. But instead, we've decided to be a coat holder and cheerleader for one side. And apparently the UK is being an alternate coat holder and cheerleader by joining in the fray. This is not what needs to happen. Israel has behaved recklessly. It has behaved dangerously. Iran is also a reckless and dangerous player. We do not need to be pouring gasoline on this fire, which is apparently what we're doing. And I think that's a huge mistake.
Obviously, both Israel and Iran would say that the other party is responsible for escalating it. And, you know, Israel is obviously still, I think, traumatized is probably the right word to use over the October 7th attacks, which were, you know, shook the country to its core. You mentioned grown-ups in the room. Do you have...
Do go with the $4.99. Old school, buddy. Old school. Thanks for checking in. Says congrats on the success of the channel. Keep up the good work. Hey man, every day's a grind, bro. Every day's a grind. You know, we try to mix it up, try to mix up the content, see what works, see what doesn't work. We'll keep plugging through, my friend. Bigger things to come for this channel, believe me. Getting the studio all together, and you know, just be able to dive into this and never give up. Never give up. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for the $4.99.
that he can do whatever the heck he wants to do, and there's not going to be any sanctions. We're now seeing a growing
Really bad
movement among Democrats, including rather significant members of Congress who are Democrats and the Senate, including the New York Times tomorrow, that is going to have an editorial saying there should be conditions on aid to Israel. We shouldn't be sending him any more munitions. Now, will that calculus change after this? I don't know. But, you know, there has been a genocide unfolding in Gaza. Let's not forget. And that has been also a very traumatizing event across not just the Arab world, but also the broader Middle East region. And frankly, what we don't need, as I said, is to be pouring gasoline on this fire. Will the Biden administration do it? They have shown no indication of wanting to tamp things down, and that is disturbing. There is no other party that can do it but us, but we have not shown the will to do it, and the result is that Israel operates with a sense of impunity. And I compare them to the spoiled child. You know, they know that they're never going to get punished for what they do, so why not just do whatever you want to do? On the other hand, you have the others in the region, Iran included, that end up feeling like the abused child. It doesn't matter what they do, they're never going to get rewarded, or they're never going to get recognized for it. So why not act out badly? So you have one side acting out badly, the other side acting out badly, one feeling they'll never be restrained, and the other feel they'll never get anything but punished. So you end up with this horrific situation. And that's why, you know, grown-up leadership is important, but frankly, there isn't any coming forward right now, and that's a sad situation.
Well, let's just bring you the latest we're hearing from the US President Joe Biden. He has released a statement in the last few moments on Iran's attacks against the state of Israel. He says, I condemn these attacks in the strongest possible terms. Mr. Biden goes on to say, I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to reaffirm America's ironclad commitment to the security of Israel. He goes on to say, tomorrow I will convene my fellow G7 leaders to coordinate a united diplomatic response to Iran's attack. And he says, while we have not seen attacks on our forces or facilities today, referring to the US forces and facilities in the region, we will remain vigilant to all threats. So that coming in from the US President Joe Biden following his conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier, him saying there that he has spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu and has reaffirmed America's ironclad commitment to the security of Israel, and that he will be convening with his fellow G7 leaders later to coordinate a united diplomatic response to Iran's attack. Interestingly, a diplomatic response there, and he will we have not seen any attacks on our forces or facilities. We remain vigilant to those threats. So the latest there from Joe Biden. Well, it's been confirmed that RAF jets are assisting Israel to defend itself from drones sent by Iran. A Ministry of Defense spokesman said in response to increased Iranian threats and the growing risk of escalation in the Middle East, the UK government has been working with partners across the region to encourage de-escalation and prevent further attacks.
Again, I'm no
Meanwhile,
expert in
the Prime Minister
geopolitics.
Rishi
I just
Sunak
think the
has
whole thing is
condemned the
bad.
move by Iran, calling it reckless attack against Israel. In a statement, he said, I condemn in the strongest terms the Iranian regime's reckless attack against Israel. These strikes risk inflaming tensions and destabilizing the region. Iran has once again demonstrated that it's intent on sowing chaos in its own backyard. He goes on to say the UK will continue to stand up for Israel's security and that of all our regional partners, including Jordan and Iraq. Alongside our allies, we are urgently working to stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. No one wants to see more bloodshed. Well, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, has this
Hello,
reaction
sir.
from...
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
Rishi Sunak was the first
Not bad, man. How you doing?
leader to
I'm hanging in there,
and
just
has
grinding away.
I saw the studio videos.
statement
Yeah, getting updated, trying to get things together. It's
To start covering geopolitics, you're gonna have to get yourself a nice big map on the wall. Some
listen, I'm
pins, some
just
threads.
reporting because I saw this come out. So, what's going on here, Ali? Maybe you can give us a little perspective. I mean, I'm not a geopolitical expert, but what is the real cause of all of this that goes on? Is this money? Is this power? Or is it all of the above?
Oh man, that's a 1400-year discussion, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so you can trace this back to, the foundings of Islam and all sorts of other things, but
Right.
right this moment, the IRGC does not want to look, they don't want to look like they've been castrated or easily picked off. There's no reason to doubt IRGC support for Hamas over the years, and obviously Hezbollah's involved and whatnot.
Mm.
So Israel struck. IRGC needed to retaliate. They've had success both using and selling their suicide drones. I was a touch surprised that they also launched cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. That felt like, so there's a symbolic escalation in a very real sense, right? Which were the suicide drones, but they could be somewhat readily defended against. Because if you escalate too quickly, then Saudi Arabia, UAE, and a lot of other people who may behind the scenes have one side or another, all their airspace is closed. There's a massive economic impact, and there's obviously massive regional instability, right? And that's going to put Iran in a more isolated position. It's not like the Sky commentator was like, well, everybody's going to side with Israel. What I don't think he realizes is that, one, that's actually geopolitically not generally the case. I mean, if you look at the UN, that's definitely not generally the case. But importantly, in this case, that it's very uncertain that Jordan and Saudi Arabia and UAE and even Qatar, which hosts some of the key Hamas leaders,
right,
will side with Iran in this case because of the sheer disruption in the region, right? And since there's the Shia and Sunni divide and whatnot, they don't look at the situation the same as Iran does. So this was I don't know. I thought this was a little bit more of an escalation than I expected. Of course, I am Iranian born. I was born in Tehran, right? So I have a community that talks about this a lot. I'm I would say I'm not I would say it's like 50-50. You have a lot of Iranians that left during the revolution.
Sure.
Quite often they refer to themselves as Persians. They generally are more westernized. Like my parents, I was born in Iran, but my parents both went to Western universities.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of Iranians that are Iranian socialists that came post-revolution that were, on the side of the revolutionaries. And they have a completely different perspective. Some could say an anti-Semitic perspective.
Sure.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how the next 24 hours plays out because Israel, he's right about one thing, is that they have to temper Israel's response in the sense of striking nuclear sites in particular. I don't know that you can or even have to temper Israel's response in response to, say, oil production sites, right? Over the past few years, I think one of the kind of unsaid things is that we didn't just pay Iran for, when I say we, the U.S. government didn't just pay Iran for, say, release of hostages or negotiations and whatnot. We also lifted a lot of restrictions on their oil production and shipment. So it's not that you say you gave them X billion, it's that you gave them X billion times Y billion of resources. And suddenly with their adjacent operations in Yemen and Syria and Lebanon, they've dramatically increased the scope of what they can support globally in terms of what we would call terrorist operations. This is ugly. This is bad, and I do fully expect that behind the scenes, Saudi Arabia, in particular, is going. We were so close to accords, proper normalization of relationships, and then just the other day, I think it was Indonesia announced, normalization of relationships with Israel, right? So, obviously, a massive Muslim country. This is a tough situation, man. This is ugly.
Yeah. I mean, I just saw this and I was like, whoa, like, and listen, I understand like politics and geopolitics is not my forte here on this platform, but I think that it's newsworthy. It's very important that people know about this. That's why I wanted to just pull a news feed up and let people chat in the chat. I don't really, again, don't really understand a lot of it. I kind of understand, but I just look at when I see things like this, like what is the implications going to be here, at home, the US, what do we now, like, what do we do? I mean, we obviously stand with, we're allies with Israel. Iran has, we've had some pretty touchy moments with Iran over the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, probably longer than that. But over the last 5 years, it's gotten, in my opinion, a little bit more, I don't know, tighter, I guess.
I think our last good opportunity to come to some sort of agreement with Iran was actually right at the beginning of the operations in Afghanistan. Right, Iran had reason with both operations in Afghanistan, and then especially with after that from their perspective, the cataclysmic war with Iraq, to provide U.S. support in both sets of operations. And Bush 43 and neocons under Bush 43 kind of fumbled that opportunity for maybe some form of relationship. And it's just steadily gotten worse since then. I don't think, the past 5 years, it's been covered differently, but I'm not sure that it has gotten worse faster than the past, since the beginning of the operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, which at this point are a few decades.
What do you think that we do now? What do we do in all of this? I mean, do we just keep our noses out of it, or are we going to have to?
I don't know. Well, you're not going to keep your noses out of it because there is no strong isolationist component in the government right now, right? Anybody who has played that leg, because you have the Ukraine situation, right? You can't play that leg, also support Ukraine, right? And it's an election year. I don't even think tomorrow will tell us what we do. I think Monday will. And the reason I say Monday is that you've had this massive uptick of college campus protests, almost not exclusively, but I would say very close to exclusively in favor of Palestine, right? So there's a large group of people in a particular demographic and age range that will probably look at this as a well-deserved response and the fault of the U.S. and stuff like that. I think that will define more because in an election year, Biden, who wants to court that demographic specifically, needs to somehow temper that response based on what he expects voter turnout to be. And then the other one is obviously, white college age women, which also tend to college educated women, which also tend to favor Palestine for various reasons, right? So I'm not sure we'll know until.
I'm sorry? Did I lose you? I think you cut out. Let's see if Ollie comes back. Give him a second. I'm going to pull this feed up.
Above us, as we assume those drones were taken out of the sky, missiles have also been launched as well. Now, that was accompanied by the sound of sirens wailing across the city of Jerusalem. This was something that was replicated across Israel as well. Now, we're hearing from the Iranian UN mission that.
No, what I was saying is I think on Monday we'll know more on Monday than we will on Sunday, because on Monday when college campuses open, see what level of, say, protests or support there are. It's, I'm of the opinion that regardless of how much rhetoric there is about, say, civil war and a divide in the country, most people are comfortable. Nobody on either side of the quote unquote political spectrum, right, want to see every store closed and wants to see blood in the street, right? They have a level of comfort with their air conditioning and internet and all sorts of things. So they like screaming, but they don't necessarily like violence. Right. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens in the next 24 hours in the Persian Gulf and what Israel is. I'm not going to say allowed to do, because I really don't think that Netanyahu's in even in the mood to entertain the allowed, right? But Iran's in a different situation than Hamas. So Hamas has, depending on who you believe, no less than 70 miles and possibly 300 miles of tunnels under Palestinian territory. They perfected the art of embedding themselves within civilian infrastructure, which means collateral damage is something that Sky commentator describes as genocide. Genocide has a definition. This is not
Sure.
genocide, but the
Right.
collateral damage is extreme,
Hmm.
right? It's extreme, and there's no way around it. It's heartbreaking, right?
Hmm.
It is horrible. But Jordan and Egypt, they're not in the mood to entertain refugees, for good historical reasons, right? Both of their governments have been attacked by refugees, a near overthrow in Jordan. That's only what 40 some odd years gone, right?
Right.
And it's just an impossible situation right now.
Hmm. Let me just get to this super sticker really quick. Kimberly G, thank you so much for the $49.99 super sticker. I really do appreciate that. Again, I just wanted to come on and just report of what's going on. Obviously, when we have geopolitical situations like this, especially war, that's going to affect the US when it happens with an ally and a non-ally, if that's the way that you want to look at it. Again, never came on here and said that I'm a geopolitical nerd or understand a lot of this stuff, but war is not good. A lot of people are going to die, and a lot of people have been dying. And the unfortunate thing is that in the end of it all, it's all the innocent people that are not involved in they're the ones that suffer. And this is going to have some implications, obviously, here on the US, because now we have to look at how do we respond. Israel is our ally. And there's been, a lot of tension with Iran. So this is like not good. And it's almost like you said, I mean, we're going into an election year. It's almost like, Iran knows that. And right now I guess, looking at, war, if that makes sense, war wise, the US is pretty thin right now. We're supporting a lot of people. And this is now just gonna, have to ramp up our money and our defense.
So money is one thing, right? The printing the money,
Sure.
the economic sensitivity is one thing.
Mhm.
But in terms of capability, right? As long as we don't need boots on the ground, the logistical overhead of supporting operations in, say, Ukraine or in Israel is actually fairly simple,
Sure.
right? Because we can do that offshore from submarines, from well station
Right.
ships,
And
and we have
drones
aircrafts
now.
all
Right.
over the region, right? As
Right.
long as we don't need to shift logistical
Excuse me.
some various supply chain issues, satellites, things to survey, boots on the ground, it's actually not that heavy a lift from a military standpoint. The heavy lift is from a geopolitical standpoint. You are enabling, say, Putin's messaging, and also you have the situation with China and Taiwan that's still lingering there, right? We talked
Yeah.
about this briefly. I thought about this Duco actually, who was in the audience. Like China has all sorts of interesting like green water and blue water type issues on their coast with their navy and whatnot. It's a non-trivial thing for them to respond with their navy. But on the flip side, if they wanted to say invade Taiwan, it would be like you in your room right up there in Massachusetts, and me in my room in Florida. You say, I'm going to go kick the shit out of a person in my living room. Ali, what are you going to do about it? Well, the answer is nothing because I'm in Florida. Like that's kind of the situation
Right.
with like China, how close they are to Taiwan versus what we can do. I
Mm.
think if China and Russia say that this level of instability does not help our interests, then I think this gets tempered very, very quickly. But if
Mm.
they believe, in particular in the case of Putin, if he believes that this level of instability helps his interests, then they will, by proxy, try to help escalate the situation, right?
Yeah, and they're going to stand with Iran anyway. Russia's going to stand with Iran, 100%.
Well, Iran, Iran has been providing some of these suicide drones and whatnot capabilities to Russia, and
Sure.
obviously Russia and Iran have a long-standing technology exchange program, right? I don't. Russia obviously has their own Islamist problem, including
Mhm.
the recent Islamist attack on that entertainment venue. So they have to play a delicate game, right? Even though they try to blame it not entirely on Ukraine, they've had a long-standing Islamist problem as well. So it's a delicate game for them. And China, though, their Islamist problem, which is primarily in the northwest regions of China, they have done like what China does, which is just kill them. Right? They re-educate them and slowly purge them from the population, and the media just turns a blind eye to it. The Western media turns a blind eye to it. So both countries have different type of Islamist problems they have to deal with in different types of ways. So they have to be careful exactly how much they, play in that sandbox.
Mm. The scary thing about it too is, with all this going on, we have the Olympics coming up in Paris in like 2 months, and gets crazy, with a lot of this stuff too. A lot of the
Absolutely,
geopolitics
yeah,
in Paris. I mean,
and
scary.
You know, you you've had attacks against Israeli athletes at the Olympics before,
Yeah.
and having attacks against Israeli athletes or U.S. athletes, athletes from the UK, countries that are seem to be sympathetic. Paris has dealt with its problems with Islamists,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of there are a lot of
Yeah,
angles this can
it's
go, right?
crazy. So how do you
Um,
think we respond in all of this? What's your opinion?
I think that all right, so my mind's going in like 10 different directions based
Yeah,
on,
mine
you know,
is
my
too.
background and whatnot, right? I think if I had to decide like right this moment, I would say that
Well, here's the statement from Biden right here. I'm sorry to cut you off. It says, at my direction to support the defense uh, of Israel, the U.S. military moves aircraft and ballistic missile defense destroyers to the region over the course of the past week. Thanks to the deployments and extraordinary skills of our servicemen. Oh, I lost that. Incoming drones and missiles. Tomorrow, I'll convene my fellow G7 leaders to coordinate united diplomatic response to Iran's brazen attack. My team will engage. Oh, Jesus Christ. Sounds like we're gonna go to war, dude.
I don't know. That doesn't actually sound like that. That sounds like they're going to. They already. I guarantee you, phones have already been picked up in Saudi Arabia in particular, and they said, okay, so this is how we propose you handle this. So the U.S.
Mhm.
has to have a show of potential force. It's like you show up in the room and your 10 bodyguards walk in, but they don't do anything, right?
Right. They're just kind of
Um,
there.
they're just kind of there, so they have to do that. That just has to be done, and so does the UK, and distinctly, you know, some other countries are kind of in a position where they kind of have to be there, right? They have to say
Right.
something, they have to show up. Israel has to temper their response, and they'll temper their response based on the fact that they are not sure that they have a firm partner in either the UK or the US right now, right? It sounds like it. Everybody likes to say it's a firm partner, but you actually have leadership in both countries that waver with the political tides very, very quickly, right? Which, right, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying they do,
Right.
right? So, and again, I think if as long as they avoid nuclear facilities, which there's a certain scary aspect to that,
God, that's
regardless, right?
scary.
As long as they avoid nuclear facilities, whether what the realities on the ground or not, I think that they will have a opportunity to respond fairly, you know, fairly substantially. Uh, at home, you know, uh, unfortunately, all of these things, right? What's going on in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel at home is a large distraction from a lot of home front problems we have, right?
Mhm.
And if we, you know, continue to do this political, you know, hiding the ball under the cups act, right? You have the immigration problem, you have the inflation problem, you have, you know, serious repercussions and instability in the real estate market, which is kind of crept up out of nowhere. Uh,
Right.
you still have long-term healthcare problems, veteran fare problems. You know, what is it? 11. The publication the other day was 11 cents of every dollar of tax
Yeah.
dollar goes to paying interest, right?
Mhm.
Which puts it, I think it's the third or fourth highest expenditure.
Mhm.
Um, it is. I don't. SJ Howard, you know, SJ Howard says could be
Yeah.
this administration's way at war to stay in power. I don't. I don't think so. I think that um, there's no their own party can't sustain that, right? I think that's, you know, something that has been said about Trump, something that was said about Bush 43, something that was said, you know, a number of times, especially early actually in the history of the U.S. Uh, but yeah, anyway, I want to jump on briefly. I think
Yeah.
this conversation, the if I was actually like where I would normally be, I would pull up a couple of interesting papers and articles.
Hmm.
There's a lot of interesting material to cover in the space, historically speaking.
Sure. I
But
mean, real quick before you jump out, listen, I appreciate you jumping on. If people don't know, Ollie and I go way back a couple of years, and it's been kind of a long time friend here on through YouTube, and you know we had some offline conversations and giving me some advice, and really great guy and supports my channel. I appreciate that, and has been supportive of me in some business decisions as well too, and giving me a lot of guidance in life. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate that.
absolutely.
But yeah, before you bounce out, you know, just to get your kind of opinion. I mean, how does the U.S. respond to this now?
I think that the you know, you have a very small country that on one hand is hopelessly outnumbered population wise, but in a
Mm,
very real sense has more capabilities than the combined or at least peer capabilities with a combined Muslim world of 1.3 billion people, which is a very odd sort of asymmetry, right? So I think the only response here is if it was 2 years ago, we weren't in an election year, I think this would be a overwhelming show of force to put this to an end as quickly as possible because there are other
Sure.
problems to deal with. But in an election year, I think the only choice of response they have is to cater to who they think their voting bloc is. And the voting bloc of the people in power, to cater to them, they need to temper the response by Israel. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do either.
Sure.
Right? Like, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do because Israel has done many, many, many things wrong. They just have. However, calling this genocide and the way things are framed and the way the media reports it, like who reports deaths in Palestine? It's they go, well, the Palestinian health minister. No, it's Hamas. It's like, how come a rocket hits a building and 17 seconds later 500 people are dead? As if they could count that. They can't. Right. But it's reported as gospel, right? Like there is a communication advantage that both Iran and Hamas have at a global level and at a level of millennials and maybe Gen Zers and certainly college age students that I think the Biden administration has to worry about politically. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just think that's the reality, is that they're going to temper Israel's response and they are going to provide anti-ballistic missile and anti-cruise missile and anti-drone technology and enforcement, which they already have. We're going to find out in the next 24 hours that it's probably more U.S. assets shot down those super drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles than Israeli assets by far, right? We're going to find that out for sure. And I think that's the extent to which they're going to take it. And then they'll definitely provide intelligence support and satellite support and air support for operations against non-nuclear facilities. I would be shocked if we provided direct support for a retaliation against a nuclear facility here in the U.S.
It's crazy because with all this kind of building up, I was hearing reports like maybe like a week or two ago that there was some inklings or ongoing threat that something could happen potentially here in the U.S. And I just
almost certainly.
I just find it interesting that was bubbling up, and now all of a sudden this happens. So
the bubbling up thing is the last thing I'm going to say, and I do need to get going, is that
no problem.
Remember that there are people playing scenarios out because of the sheer scale of the federal government for everything all the time. So every time something happens, somebody has some file or paper that they were assigned to generate that says, I predicted this would happen. And that's not because somebody was pressing it. That's because the sheer size of the federal government, and you have the Navy War College, and you have all these universities that have grants to study this stuff. They plot attacks on every city, like what an attack would look like, what a response would look like, a war with every country. Right? A few years ago, famously, people said, why are we planning for a war with the United Kingdom? There was like a paper that came out, I think it was the Navy War College. It's because that's the scale of the government grants and stuff. They do this with everybody. Just what it is. Right. So it's always constantly bubbling up. Since 9/11, we've been on this ridiculously high. There's a constant threat level. Now, on one hand, that is used to abuse government power. Just now FISA was renewed with a nice little cutout for congressmen. So the FBI, right, can spy on everybody without a warrant except congressmen. Nice little cutout there, right?
Right.
So on the one hand, you have that level of abuse. On the other hand, you have like a complete negligence, at least in my opinion, of protecting, say, the border. Right. So it's rubbernecking. It's geopolitical or federal government rubbernecking. They're just staring at the threat and they're going to they're going to self-prophesize it into existence.
Oh boy.
And I'm not going to say that this is a Democrat versus Republican issue, because the Republicans, again, also on the FISA stuff, they just wanted to cut out for the congressman and they push it forward. Right. It's not as clear as a Republican versus Democrat issue. And if people who know me, and you know me, I'm basically like a minarchist anarchist, right? I spent so much time in DC that I became very disillusioned with the federal government, right? I look at things like the Declaration of Independence and all the drafts of it. And if you ever get a chance to read the various drafts of the Declaration of Independence, it's fascinating. I look at that document in particular as prophetic, right? But the actual government in practice today is a completely different situation. But civil unrest is almost a certainty, especially around large college towns. I think if people remember even some of the minor destruction that, say, Occupy Wall Street, like this will be minor Occupy Wall Street and BLM will be minor in comparison to what happens if the response is even slightly oriented towards a response to the new conservative. And what I
Right.
say in part not to curse a lot and get you demonetized.
Of course.
But I have a lot of information coming at me as well. I have a lot of friends.
Right.
I don't know. A couple people know. You may not know that I actually took a trip to Israel not long ago. Shortly after the onset of shortly after the October 7th attacks. So, in any case,
said to you, Ali Reza, super insight shared. I appreciate your point of view. Thanks for coming on. So
we will hopefully we will not have to talk about this a lot, but we might end up talking about this again.
Yeah, Kimberly says, where can we find Ali? So Ali is kind of a watch YouTube guy. You can find him. Is it on? Is it still JJ's Hangout?
No, it's the Watch Hangout is the main channel. The Watch Hangout. I generally, Kimberly, I generally don't talk geopolitics on the air. I came from 3-letter space.
Right.
So if I do, or if Brian decides to cover this more, maybe I'll do it over here. But generally, I talk about wristwatches and keep it there.
Yeah.
But
I just jump on.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody
I just
have a
jump
good.
on when there's breaking news and just let people know. So that's it. Good to see you.
I look like my King Kong in the background.
Yes, you do. I love that thing.
I got the whole thing going on. So, all right, folks, I'm out. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to jump on and just let everybody know there was some breaking news. Iran has launched an attack on Israel and technically has declared war. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye out on this. And I want to thank Ali for jumping on. He's an old school friend of mine here on the YouTube airways. And it's always nice to hear his perspective because he's very level-headed, very, very educated in this, and just a smart, all-around good dude. So he can explain it without feeling like it's on either side of the spectrum. I know people get very upset. And again, I'm not a geopolitical master here, but when things drop like this, I think it's very important for people to know. So I just wanted to get some of that news out there. All right. I'm gonna pop off. I'm super tired. I just did a 4-hour stream just before this again, but I just wanted to jump on and just let everybody know. So Israel has launched attacks. Iran has launched an attack on Israel. We'll have to see how the U.S. responds. Oh boy, I would just say buckle down your money. If you don't have to extra spend right now, don't wait to see what happens. Hopefully this will calm down and won't escalate beyond what it is. But these things tend to get messy sometimes. So, all right, everybody, I'm going to head out. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a good night, and I will talk to everybody soon. I'll be back, I think, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll talk a little bit more Karen Reed. All right, everybody, I'm out of here. Bye.
True crime, we going deep in the dark. Yeah, peeling back the layers, expose the hidden in mark. From the streets to the alleys where the secrets lie. Getting into minds of the wicked, no alibi. True crime, unraveling the web of evil. No stone left unturned. We dive into the crime. Yeah, we digging up the dirt, bringing justice to the crime. LTL True Crime, unveiling dark realities of the crime. Unraveling